Gone are the days of formal etiquette. So, what should you do in the maddening social situations you face every day? How long should you take to respond to that message? What should you say to get out of that gathering? When you start seeing a new therapist, how do you talk about it with your first therapist whom you are still seeing? This is No Etiquette, the podcast where we address modern etiquette questions in a nonsense fashion. I'm Vivian Lee, coming to you from Singapore, and joining me on the line is my best friend Sophia Bose in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hi, Sophia.
Vivian, how are you?
I hate that question, but I am so happy to be talking to you again, to simply brush it aside as a vague question that could not possibly cover where we have been in the past few weeks.
Can I ask you a question about that question?
Sure.
So, for some reason, because we have talked about how bad a question, how are you is, every time I say how are you to someone, I immediately follow it up with, I'm aware this is a bad question. And they look at me with, confusion, oh, is this a bad question? and so I think I feel like I'm doing something that's a little not etiquette, because then it starts to confuse them about their question. And because if they've asked me that, and if I've asked it back or something, somehow there's some inadvertent insulting that happens. And so
I'm sorry I've done this to you.
You haven't done anything to me. I wonder what the etiquette is around talking about how good or bad a question, how are you is.
So here's my theory. I think how are you is an okay functional question. Everybody understands that we're just very briefly exchange pleasantry, barely more than I'm doing great, how are you? This.
Yeah,
Or a
yeah.
very short, oh, I was a little sick last week. Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Boom. And then we
Yeah.
talk about our main thing.
Yeah.
I see the purpose. I'm constantly how truly necessary it is to sort of grease all social interactions with other people with just a little bit of not even necessarily kindness, but
Yeah.
a little bit of I give you some human regard and you give me some back, and then we're feeling okay to move on to what we really want to do. I don't know if that sounds too calculated, but it is difficult to look at somebody and launch immediately into business or
Yeah.
topic.
No, I think you're right. I think it does serve an important function. You can't just start right away.
Yeah, you're trying to do just a little bit of friendliness. Maybe let's call it friendliness. A little bit of friendliness. Baseline human friendliness.
So would then how are you be the optimal baseline human friendliness?
Yes, if that's the situation. So I think what I really detest about the how are you question is when you're trying to use it as a soft opener to someone else. If I'm feeling like you want something from me other than the most baseline quick polite, friendliness,
Yeah.
then I get annoyed with it. I especially hate it as a texting question, which I think is our very first thing, but I'm like, what do you from this? It is so broad. Do you want me to tell you about my week? Do you want me to tell you about my joys and sorrows? Do you want me to what do you want from this?
Okay, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to find the best way to phrase this. I agree with you in the sense that when someone asks me that, and I have apologies, my watch at midnight it starts to ring.
Is it
Because I
hungry?
turn
Does it need
into
to call
pumpkin.
at midnight?
It's like an alarm thing. I can turn it off, and somehow I just didn't. And I don't
Wait,
know
why does
why I
it have
said
to be
it.
midnight?
It just goes off. I'm not really sure why. Because there's I think there's 4 different presets, and one of them is at 12, and somehow 12 felt like somehow a special number, and so I didn't turn it off. But then it didn't occur to me that means that at midnight it's gonna run. So sorry about this interruption.
That's great. I love that you kind of allow your watch to have its whole it's a new watch. It's like you're letting it have its own life. It's like, oh, you were set to go off at midnight. You may continue to go off at midnight. I will not
really
interfere with
appreciate
your
that.
dealings. Watch.
Thank you. You're right. I am doing a kindness to this watch. It was programmed as such, and I shall let it be. I think no, this how so this is because very recently actually in the past 8 hours, a friend who I used to be quite close with texted me and said, "How are you?" with nothing else. And
That's the one. Yeah.
that's what, right? Nothing else. A relationship that was close at one point, such that it may or may not warrant an answer, especially like, why is this person reaching out of the blue? And then I realized that last week I asked someone a question. It was an open-ended one. I think it was something like something about like preferences. And her response was, "Well, you'll just find out over time," or something like that. Almost like my question was a bad one because it was open-ended or something. And I think my immediate head thought to her response was, maybe it's okay to respond to a question however you want to respond to it. Like, maybe that is the best way to respond to it. Like, maybe the person is asking is not specific, and it's up to you to decide how specific you want it to be.
This is true.
And that is the kindness that you're doing. And that is the kindness that they're doing also, because they are not setting parameters around what kind of a response you're going to give. It's quite open-ended in that sense too.
What you're saying, interviewing skills, especially in the context of not a job, you do need to give specific.
Yeah.
But say you're
Yeah.
asked a question interview setting that you don't really want to answer, and the trick is a lot of times you can give exactly whatever answer you actually want to give. Like, you can even
You're
reject the
right.
question or just turn it, say it's about like tell me about X. You can actually with real charisma and smoothness say, "Oh, it's a good question about X, and it actually makes me think about Y that I've been thinking a lot." And you can just sort of slip in deftly what you actually want to talk about. I mean, it depends on the setting, but if it's, say, like an entertain kind of interview or something, because if we're thinking about it, like, the other person just wants some kind of interesting answer, and so why can't you just reply the interest you want?
Yes.
I think I resented a little for the "how are you," because like you have to do some, especially with the thinking, you have to do a little like rummaging, right? So maybe this is me being boorish and not very high etiquette, but with something as open-ended as "how are you," okay, what am I gonna get?
Yeah.
Um,
Can
yeah,
I say something?
yeah.
I wonder if, because I felt the immediate, perhaps boorish, like like I was
Yeah,
immediately like
resentment. I feel
really,
resentment a lot when people ask that.
I immediately felt that. I was just like, really, like, I'm tired, man. Like, I've had a long week. Like, what do you
That's
want
exactly
from
how
me?
that question makes me feel. No, that's it. That's it. And so I don't mind if, like, we're colleagues and I see you at the water cooler, "Hey, how are you?" "I'm
Yeah,
great, how are you?"
yeah,
Like, that is
yeah,
absolutely trouble-free.
yeah.
It's all the many other occasions. And I think, okay, I can see how it's sort of, maybe you can see it as like largesse to give such an open-ended question. But I am a little like, you're initiating, like, initiate
Yeah,
better, or
yeah,
something. It's like,
yeah.
you want to if it's like volleyball and you want me to help you hit the ball over, like, serve me a better one, man. Like, let's be on the same team. I think that's the sort of like, and I'm fully with you. If it's also been, especially if it's been a bad week, maybe if you've had a really happy week, it's easy to field some chipper "how are you?"
Oh my goodness, Vivian, you have hit, I think you've actually hit on something really, because in this past week, I have also gotten a "how are you" that was very masterfully done. Because what this friend did is she gave me basically an entire paragraph about what was going on with her. Like, she
First.
started with, "How are you?
Hmm.
It's been a while, blah, blah, blah. Here's what's going on with me." And then sort of
Yeah.
gave me a lot of whatever was
Yeah.
going on with her.
Yeah.
And so you're right, because yes, actually yes, because if you just ask it without anything, then you are expecting more work without having given any.
I think that's it. That the unevenness of it. Because you're right.
Yeah.
If it's a very pleasantry swapping exchange, then it's even. You
Yeah.
say "how are you?" I say "I'm great."
How are you? Yeah.
Done. We're kind of,
Yeah.
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 And you're right, like, as much like, I don't like, "Ooh, emotional labor of answering "how are you?" But it's true. Like, it's if I start off an exchange that you have initiated and I immediately feel there's some kind of imbalance,
Yeah.
That's not nice. That's not a nice to receive from
Okay.
words.
I agree with you. Is this a deficit in our what can I even say? Generosity of spirit? Because like essentially what the person wants is connection. And
Yeah.
our initial reaction to the bid for connection is really? Like
No, but actually, I think this is something I had been in psychology. When we're looking to be in or deepen a relationship of any kind, we are looking for an indication of investment from the other person. And this is not even in a calculate.
Yeah.
We're looking for mutuality.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the how are you question can signal, yeah, like I'm gonna give a tiny amount and hope it
Yeah.
returns me a big amount. And maybe we're in an uncharitable mood. But I do think I've been on the end of so many unpleasant how are yous where either the person then gives very little, in return, or then asks for something because they didn't even care how you were really. They were just sort of leading. Yeah, it's getting very grouchy. But I do think there's something behind our annoyance. I'm going to defend it because I do test the.
I appreciate your defense of the resentfulness that we've, but I'm suspicious of it also because it feels too clean to be immediately resentful of a thing. Like I'm suspicious of it. I think this, I'm a little suspicious of it.
Like I can see how it says who are you, ask her how are you. I think there's better ways to
I think
as
that you and I
small
must
as
have
as small as you follow up from our last like that's kind of so small.
Yeah. Okay. And you know what? I think I remember the last time we talked about this. I think we said it was okay to give back what we received, right? So if they say, how are you?
Yeah.
I think it's okay to say, good, how are you?
Yeah, right back.
And if they want to do more, like if they want to go deeper, then they can go deeper, and then you can go deeper, and then you can go from there.
Yeah. Or in my case, I usually kick the question away and replace it with another one when you ask it. This is also a choice to one. But I always like your emphasis talking about like you always get to decide. Like you're not locked in. You're not like a victim of someone's how are you. Like you have options.
Yeah.
You are allowed to feel
Line. Victim of
you're allowed
someone's
to,
how are you?
yeah, I mean you're allowed to be annoyed at it, but you do what you will with it.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is very much for our topic, which is the concept of a lark.
I want to hear more about larks, Vivian.
I should explain. Okay, here's the backstory, dear listeners. We've wanted to talk about the lark or a lark. What is we've wanted to talk about this for some time. It began just before our trip because I think I had gone to a library to check out more books related to Norway and Sweden. And I was just sort of going, I always feel a little, when I go to a library for one specific book, first I must get that book. If it's like slightly missing, it's a real bummer. Yeah. But that is not all. One must leave the library with surprises. Yes. I think that's kind of right. It's a bit of a sad trip when you go and you get exactly like it's not like going to the grocery store. Okay, actually going to the grocery. Sometimes you can tolerate leaving the grocery store with exactly what was on your list, but usually you do get some extra treats. Actually, I think it's just like the grocery store. Yeah.
It's just like the grocery store. Yeah.
It's not just a fetch quest. You must you're there also to receive other things and books, or
there's an adventure element.
There's such a sad feeling when you're walking through a library stocked with books that are yours for the borrowing, and you leave with only the book you came to get. What is that? That's like a sign that you're tired of life.
There's something deeply wrong about that. Yeah.
Something's wrong. Something's missing. So I was walking around the aisles looking for books. I did get a couple of other ones. And one that I just happened to see was by the children's book author Nesbit. And it was in the adult section. I had no idea that she wrote books for adults. And we discussed this later. So I had read The Enchanted Castle. Did you read that? I forget. You were going to read it.
I think I did read it, but I can't remember. It was on a plane. I was on a plane.
You read it on the plane. I think, you read it on the plane. We've had many things happen to us in the last few months, dear listeners. The trip was great. We've had many life things happen. Life has been a lot.
Many life things. Yeah.
It is perfectly understandable that one would forget a novel one had read on the plane.
Completely. My memory's been terrible.
But please tell me you found it. I think you enjoyed it.
I did. I remember I downloaded. I think I ended up downloading. There's some bizarre omnibus that had 20 of her books or something.
I've gotten something similar. Yeah. She's not, I don't know if she's fully public domain yet, but she wrote quite a lot of
Maybe.
books and they are
Yeah.
available by the bundle.
Mm-hmm. They are by the bundle. So yeah, I think I
Mhm.
got the bundle, and I think I read I'm
Mhm.
pretty sure I read The Enchanted Castle.
Yeah.
Oh, I did. Yeah, because they had that food, right? There's a pretend food.
Pretend food that they ate in the
Yes.
castle.
Yes, I read
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
It's a great children's book. So I remembered Ease Nesbit really clearly because I'd had and read that book a lot as a child and found it like surprisingly enjoyable. It's because it's got quite a lot of plot for a children's book.
Mm-hmm.
And to at least my child's mind, the whole shape of what the book was not clear until the very ending. It feels sort of, I think this is her adult books. They're a little episodic in a good way. It's the same characters,
Yeah.
but they're having very discrete adventures.
Yeah.
And then by the end, it sort of sums up. And actually, it's quite well, like the overall plot becomes, it's a little like maybe like the first Harry Potter book, where like, like you know that the Harry and Voldemort are going to have a confrontation, but when you're just having the adventures as a child, like your potions class, your this, your Quidditch match, you're not really focusing on that's what being a child is like.
Yeah.
You can really just have episodes and fully be in those episodes. And then when you look back, you're like, oh, of course I was going to bump into Voldemort, but...
Yeah. But you don't even know what to expect, right? Because you've never done it before. So there's no...
Yeah. You don't know. And you're not picking up on the sort of like foreshadowing.
Yeah, because you simply don't even... Yeah, you're not looking for it.
Yeah. Yeah. You notice it, but you don't realize that's what, you're too young.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's sort of the shape of an E. Nesbit book. And I had found her book, The Lark, at the library, not knowing she'd written for adults, checked it out, read it. It very much was sort of a thing we talked about on our... The story of it... Did you read The Lark? No, I'm sure.
I
Did you read it or did I just tell you about it? Okay, you did. Oh yeah, we talked about the ending because it is a delicious treat of a book for the weary adult reader because it has so much of the spirit and the magic and the hopefulness of her children's books. But for two young women, I think they're about 20, and their lives are before them. They've been shut up all their life in kind of like some kind of boarding school situation to keep them safe from the war, but they're very aware that they've lived kind of closed, small lives. And finally they are unleashed upon the world because they have received an inheritance, and they go to the house of the aunt who left them the inheritance, and the first thing they find out is that their guardian has like gambled away all their money.
Yeah.
So it's a really grim start to a book.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the beginning of a very, hard scrabble, kind of like gritty, like down and out kind of book. But that is exactly the kind of book that it is not, because the two heroines resolve that they will take it as a lark. They kind of decide, here we are, two heroines without a penny to our name. We must get by somehow, let's make... And they don't even say, well, let's make the most of it. They kind of, they treat it like it's going to be a fine adventure. And through the sort of like very strong, I guess you would call like pluck and wit or something. Like it's not, it's not, it makes the change, right? The way that they're able to face everything and go into things with aplomb, they begin to make possibilities where there were none. The nice thing about having the two heroines is they can take turns. Like when one is really down, the other pulls her up and says, well, it's going to be a lark. And it's nice that they take turns doing it, because we have the sort of more cheery one and the more dour one, but they really do reverse roles when needed.
Yeah. Which I think
And
is really,
it was great fun.
I'm just shifting. My legs are stuck.
No, one should shift him. And so the lark, the idea of facing into whatever, oppressive misery is upon you, and deciding how you're to take it in stride, and even in a kind of jolly way.
Yeah.
I think is sort of, that was, and not in a delusion, not in a kind of like dreamy and practical way, but in a way that really infuses your spirit with some more daring do. That was the Lark.
Daring do.
Daring do.
Daring do. Do you think that something I've been wondering is, how effectively can one have a lark just by themselves? Like, how much of a lark is like a activity with somebody else.
Like, can you have a lark by yourself?
Yeah.
I think you, but it's a little bit. It's got a different character.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're looking at a little. I've like barely.
Yeah, I've read that one.
Like one of those like solo. There's always like a slight. They can be content in themselves, but or like okay, so you really like Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah.
But Anne is so good at. She always has another person with her, right? She has great sense of. She has a great spirit by herself, but I think she's always kind of able to pull in it. Like that's her great gift, right? Like she cheers up the
and
two
her
people
larks
who
are
adopt
with
her.
people. Yeah.
Her larks are with people.
Yeah.
She doesn't really have solo larks, does she?
Mm-hmm. Does she have any solo larks? You know, I think they only talk about her solo larks in relation to when she was unhappy. Or, you know, just the before times. Like, I think when...
Yeah. Maybe, I mean, maybe that's like a lot of because the two and the lark have each other, and then they have two sort of gentleman caller kind of figures who tag along, obliging. And they go about their neighborhood kind of like bringing cheer to everyone. I mean, that makes them sound very goody two-shoes, but they animate the people around them and, you know, bring together visitors. They have funny stories about borders. Much of it is involving other people and getting the sense of fun from sharing it with other people. I think you're right. So what began this topic for today was I was complaining to you about some boring drudgery in my life that I have to get done, and I'm realizing those are quite solo. Like, you know, sometimes you got to just sit down and pay your taxes, which is not the thing I'm doing, but it's sort of like a comparable, right? Like, or like when you sit down and you look through your insurance papers or something, like those are so, like maybe if you have a spouse to do it with, but then you also have someone to fight with over it, right? Like it's not, like you're not going to naturally make it kind of jolly. I'm the only child, so I think I have never felt like I needed someone else to do things with in order to get them done or, you know, to be happy about them. Like I don't reach for another person. But I do think you're onto something that it is not easy, like maybe impossible to have a lark by oneself if what is getting you through the situation is a shared sense of this is lousy, but we're going to really make of it kind of.
I am really surprised right now with how what we're talking about connects with a conversation I had with my brother-in-law this morning when he was helping me over the phone to remove these large wood-framed with cloth in the center shades for these skylights. And these shades are they're quite large, like probably 4 feet or something. I mean, large. Maybe 5 feet even. It's just tall. No, 4 feet. 4 feet. There was a point where, you know, how much can a human help over a video call if, you know, I'm ineffectually standing there with a stick and I don't know where to push it. You know, so like everybody has like limits. And but I remember suddenly it was so funny, like the whole situation of what was happening. My sister was nowhere to be found. Like she has no idea. Nobody, like, you know, here I am standing with my Swiffer stick and my brother-in-law was like drinking coffee, like at his favorite cafe. He was like in the patio, like trying to like figure out from like my very, like, because it kept shaking, you know, like trying to figure out from my shaky video, like where the precise pushing area is. And I started laughing and I remember thinking like, oh, this is such a lark because this is not like a fun, like, it could very easily be not a fun thing, right? It's like, oh, I'm trying to do this chore and I don't know how, and there's nobody to help me, and like, and so then at some point when I was done and I managed to get those out with his help, we started talking about how I think he was saying something about how like his son, like my nephew, doesn't enjoy doing things with him, like chores, and then he said something like, yeah, you know, like. It's not like I need him to do those chores. It's not like he could help anyway. Like half the time, it's like it would be, and then I think I said something like, wouldn't it be great to have like a dating app where or like some sort of matchmaking app where like you exclusively do chores with someone. So like you are gonna find like you have a certain chore and like. You're trying to find someone who either has a skill that can help you with this chore or you have a skill that can help them with their chore, and then you mutually do these chores together. And because like we're all grown And like our time is so limited and we have to do stuff. And it's a really good way to get to know someone, right? Like if you're doing stuff. So that would be kind of like anyway, so that was our idea. And right now, and when we were talking, what I realized is essentially it's taking these like activities that are kind of boring on your own, but are so enriched and fun, and there's somebody else involved. And I think the reason is because it becomes a lark.
Especially if it's, I mean, like a helpful other person, right? Like
Yeah,
someone who's
yeah,
assisting and like, or doing the same, or equally,
or
stuck in
somehow,
between.
yeah, or just as confused by the situation, or like able to share that experience with you.
Yes, yeah. And then it's a little easier to find the lighter side of it, to like laugh at it and see the absurdity if you have another person.
Exactly.
It's possible, but harder to maintain that by yourself.
Yeah.
You start to sound a little, like as I was thinking, I thought of a solo story, but I also realized that as it was happening to me, I was so aware that I needed to tell other people a story because I needed someone to share it with. Because if it just happens to you by yourself, you're right, it's not really a lark. It's not, even if you tell, like you're trying, what you want is to share it. You want someone else in that moment with you.
Yeah.
Kind of seeing the bit. I will tell the story. I think I've told you the story, but this was in an apartment I lived in Michigan, and I had been allotted a kind of like just like big wooden locker in the basement, like a pretty big storage locker.
I don't know
like,
that I know the story, but okay.
Ooh, big was it? Sort of like maybe the size of like half a closet or something. So not ultra big, but not terribly small.
Yeah.
When you're moving in, it's just kind of a wild blur.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of like vaguely remember stowing some things in there, I thought, and then like, I remember buying a lock for it and et cetera, et cetera. And moving it upstairs and then like not really looking at whatever I put down there, I knew was going to be just long-term storage, like your suitcases or your boxes that you moved in with, something that you really don't need much, but need to own.
Yeah,
Need to own. So as I was moving out of that place 3 years later, that was one of my chores to go like figure out what was in there, like get it together and move all your stuff out. And so I go down to the basement. I look at the lock. It's one of those padlocks, and it's the kind that is with a numbered setting, and I couldn't find the number code setting that I had brought with it. And now I'm trying to string this together. This will all become clear at the ending. But you imagine me 3 years later, you go down, you see your storage locker, it has this number lock in it. And I'm like, all right. So I Google how to break into your own number lock. Because a friend had told me before this could be done. They're not that secure.
Yeah.
So I look up some website, and it has to do with sort of like you turn it a certain way, you feel exactly how much it gives, you listen, kind of. So I go down to the basement. I'm doing this for like, it was maybe 45 minutes. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I do it. I feel the lock spring open.
Oh wow! Wait, you did it?
And in that moment, I did it. The lock comes open in my hand, and in that moment, as few times in my life has it happened this way, but my life flashes before my eyes. And what I remember in that exact second is when I moved into the apartment, the locker that had my apartment number on it was taken. It was like there was already a lock on it and people had their stuff on it. And I think I either went, I'll take some other locker, or I said, forget it, I won't put something in the locker. I must have taken another locker because I remember buying a lock. I had like the wrapper, And in that second, it comes open, and I open the door, and it's someone else's stuff because I've broken into someone else's lock.
Oh my gosh. This is amazing.
I think that ended it. Like, I think what I figured what had happened was that, someone else took my locker or something. My stuff must have been thrown out.
Yeah.
I think it was just some cardboard boxes and a very big suitcase that I never liked, but it was given to me by an aunt. Oh my gosh, this is a family story, but they had gone to buy the suitcase at like Macy's, and there was an ad for the suitcase that said the sale, that it was on, and then the store had put the ad, they put the wrong suitcase in the ad, so like the price was wrong on the suitcase, but they had to honor it. Something happened such that my relatives came back with a far bigger suitcase than they wanted. One of the biggest suitcases I've ever seen, like utterly unwieldy. My cousin at the time was about 5 or 6 years old, and we put her in the suitcase and like rolled her around the apartment just for a lark because
Oh my
we
god.
were cracking up about how big the suitcase
Oh
was,
my
and
gosh. Yeah.
eventually it came to me to move to college and beyond with because no one wanted the suitcase. Like, it's the only thing it's good for is putting as much stuff as you can into it and then moving it from point A to point B. You cannot travel with suitcase.
Yeah.
And I think that's how I lost the suitcase. But as I was breaking into someone else's locker, I fully had the feeling that I needed to tell a lot of people because it was a lark and it would have been hilarious if there had been someone else with me. And in the absence of that, I could only share it later. But yeah, it was if you're alone, you're just a person breaking into someone else's locker.
My goodness. What a story. Yeah, you've never told me this story. This is great.
No, no, the
You
time I
know,
broke
okay,
into
here's the thing about you, Vivian. Maybe it's accidental, but somehow you're able to get access to places that you shouldn't have access to. Because I remember this from our trip in Norway. You just found the secret passage to the breakfast area.
I really don't consider this, and it's because I have such a feeling syndrome, or like I'm not supposed to be here. Like that feeling prohibits me. But to some people, that like excites. Like the challenge of that makes them
Yeah,
very
yeah,
happy.
yeah.
Like I had this friend in college whom
Uh-huh.
had figured out that, and I think since then security's probably changed, but at the
Yeah.
time in Manhattan, you could go to the Yale University Club.
Uh-huh.
And if you just looked kind of well dressed, you could confidently leave your suitcase there and
Wow.
pick it up later because they just assumed you were Yale.
Oh, wow.
But you have
This is
to have a
great.
certain kind of demeanor and confidence. Just do that.
Yeah, you have to
And
just
be like,
like
"Oh,
do
yes,
the
I
thing,
went to
right?
Yale.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh yes, class of 28, whatever
Yeah.
it was."
Yeah. Yeah.
Or like the kind of person who can sneak in. Like
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, it was for me. I think it happens almost.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, you could sneak
there
into
was a
any
time.
event, I'm very sure.
There was a time in an office I
Uh-huh.
tried to the stairs, and what I did
Uh-huh.
was I locked myself into like I went into the stairwell and the door shut
Uh-huh.
behind me and I
Oh
realized there
my
was no
god.
handle on the side of the door because it
What?
was just an emergency staircase and I didn't
Ah.
have my phone with me.
What?
And yeah, because it was like my lunch break and I was like, "Are there
Yeah, yeah,
stairs?"
yeah.
And the door shut heavily behind me and that was that. And I looking back, like I could have it wasn't that dire. Like the door that opened to the office, it was a little bit okay, there was a little bit of like a room in between. So I
Yeah,
wasn't like
yeah,
immediately near the office. So I would have had to make
yeah,
quite a lot of noise. I think
yeah.
someone would have it wasn't
Well,
impossible that someone would
yeah,
hear me. But at the
yeah.
time I was like, well, I guess I'll just keep going. And I was on a
Uh-huh.
high floor and I just started going down the stairs, going down the stairs, going down the stairs. All the doors are
Uh-huh.
shut.
Oh gosh.
Fortunately, I run into I see some people like there's like cleaners in the building just chilling in the stairwell,
Uh, oh,
and one of them has left the door a little bit ajar on the floor that they were
oh.
on, and I
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
smile at them and I just like go out and I end up in another building's office, which is a serious security breach, I guess.
Ah, I remember
And then I
this
just sort
story
of
now.
quickly found the elevators and left. But yeah,
Oh
it
my gosh.
only by accident. But see, that
And
that too
yet,
was not quite a lark because I was quite alone. I think if there had been another person,
oh my goodness, yes.
something
Man,
like
if I
that,
was there, you know how much fun we would have?
oh, we
We
would have
would be
just
doubled
giggled,
over laughing.
doubled over laughing, just like this is how it ends.
Yes. This is how it ends.
Maybe
Oh my
laughter is so vital to a lark, and it is not unheard of to laugh by yourself, but it's different. When you're laughing by yourself,
yeah.
that's like dancing by yourself. There's something inherently
Yeah.
sad about it.
Well, I
Like
wouldn't say dancing by yourself is inherently sad.
I'm thinking of it in the sense of the Robin song, I think,
Uh-huh, uh-huh,
specifically.
uh-huh,
Like,
uh-huh.
you're dancing on your own because your ex-lover is dancing with this other woman. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
the kind
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, okay, yeah, okay, there's a world in which dancing by yourself is okay, but when it's
Yeah.
like yeah, laughing by yourself, again, can be okay, but is a little nutty or a little what is it? It's not a lark.
Yeah, it's not it doesn't have the, like, depth of feeling that a lark can have. It's like,
It's just missing
mm,
the exchange of it with an that
yeah.
is
Yeah, what is there something a human can do to turn the thing into a lark?
comes down to your powers of invention, and I think they're larger than we give them credit for.
Mhm,
I think that's kind of the whole point of like where they take just about the worst of situation, not
mhm, mhm.
short of like absolute death and torture kind of
Yeah,
deals, like,
yeah, yeah.
um, They do. What I like is they have like we mentioned the trading off, right? Like there's moments like there's time when like one of them like, falls down the stairs and sprains her ankle and like
Yeah.
genuinely is down for it. That part is not a lark.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the subsequent stuff and
Yeah.
the helping her out and the resuming
Yeah.
and the whole story turns out.
Yeah.
I think that's the path. Find another person. Like the idea is that just about anything can be
Indeed.
taken in a larkish way.
Mm.
I think that's a great path that we don't always use in our crotchety, annoyed with how our use lives of like, is there something I can do in an
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
I know I interrupted you. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Low etiquette. This is a question about the etiquette of a lark.
Yes.
What is the etiquette? So say one person, okay, say there's two humans and a situation has befallen them. What is the etiquette behind turning it into a lark? So say one person is not experiencing it as a lark, and the other wants to make the experience a lark. What is the way to do this?
I think in the book they have this really artful British way of kind of approaching the other person like it's bad, but here we're going to make a lark of it. And it's like a very it's sort of like the question like, if someone's down, do you cheer them up or do you commiserate with them?
Correct.
And they have kind of a way of doing both, but cheering up kind of is stronger and the other person in turn has to respond to it. And there's times when the other person is just like, no, I'm too annoyed at this thing at the moment. And the other person lets it go. Like it's not just like it's not like toxic positivity. It's not that. I think what helps is the two of them, I think quite early on, right, kind of make that pact, like that we're going to look at this whole thing that's happening to us as a lark. And so they always have that to come back to. And they're good friends. They've been friends for a number of years. Are they cousins? Remember? I don't.
Maybe mildly cousins. I don't really.
They have a long connection, and then they have that between them, and then they can. But okay, so on the etiquette, since I think something I've been trying to keep in mind is that we have. Maybe I'll speak for me. I have more power than I think to improve a situation sometimes, and that's not to say you don't commiserate when someone's down, but I think but just we really can act in ways that improve or worsen the situation or someone's day or how they feel about it. Like that is hugely in our power. It's up to the other person then, but there's quite a lot that we.
I agree with you.
I think it's situational, but it's
I really like the framing. Sorry, what?
Yeah, it's a little like what you did in the call we were having before we started this recording, where I was complaining to you about the stuff. And you said something like, things are so bad. You have to take it as if when the weather is so awful, and you sort of like you just go for it. Like you just sort of like laugh into the storm. I don't know, getting it wrong a little bit, but there's a tactful way in which you can give someone some good cheer about their situation. Maybe it's a laugh, maybe it's something else, but I think that's a high etiquette thing to do. I think a sense of humor goes a very long way with such thing. Like there's virtually no situation, even kind of a weird sense of like it, unless like fully misplaced and insensitive. And then even then, I think maybe a person can be annoyed in the moment and look at it later and go, well, they were trying to do a help.
Yeah. I really I like the way like I like what you said about how early on in the story they decided that they would have a lark. Like I wonder if part of the etiquette of some sort of sustained interaction with another person includes somebody saying even bluntly like let's have fun with this or like let's have a lark with it or like let's or can we or even maybe even asking permission instead of stating the thing itself. Yeah.
The two of us have larks. Do you have larks with
I think I had larks with my sister. Yeah. And it's the same thing. It's like the imagination thing, right? It's like having a good sense of imagination. And my brother-in-law, I have larks with him.
You do have larks with
I really think it's the three. Yeah, that's it. I think it's just the three of you, my sister, and my brother-in-law. I can't imagine. I don't think there's anybody else. How about you?
maybe I'm sure it's happened. Maybe like the friend college with.
Hmm.
I think that would be a good, like I can remember this was I was not only in the handbell choir, I think I was one of the co-organizers for a while. I loved being a choir, I gotta say. I
What
have
choir?
no embarrassment about this. Okay, do you know what a handbell is?
No.
It is, it's a bell that you ring one in each hand,
Yeah.
typically. So they're kind of large, but not too big. The biggest ones you will ring with two hands. The
Okay.
smallest ones you can maybe hold a couple in one hand if you're
Yeah.
very skilled. It was really good. But you're generally holding one in each hand,
Yeah.
and you're playing songs on the bells, where each bell is one note. I think it's kind of like an English church kind of. That's the place you would see it the most
Sounds
these
hard.
days. It's not that hard in a way because if you have some basic, like if you can read music, you're only
Yeah.
really responsible for 2 to 4 notes. Like depending on how many
Um,
people you have, like we could have had a situation where every person played a single note. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
most of us had about 3 or 4.
Got it.
But you just sort of like highlight your note very much on the page, and then when it comes to it, you play your one, and you're just playing
Um,
together. And
that's
we
kind
were
of
not
lovely.
I really liked it because I'm
Yeah.
someone who, I think everyone likes music. I really liked playing it. I'm not particularly skilled at it and I or practiced very much.
Mm.
But
Yeah.
handbells was so fun and so, it was just like you could do it with other people without too much difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really liked it. I made all my friends join because we didn't have enough people.
I
And
didn't even know this is something you'd done. What a
oh,
life
this was
you've had.
well, but I'm remembering always the logistics of I think anybody who's played in some kind of orchestra knows how much like unglamorous just like carrying of stuff needs to happen. So we had to go and I think this is a good example of a lark because if you were doing this by alone it'd be kind of so the
Yeah.
bells were in
Yeah.
these heavy cases.
Uh-huh.
Heavy like velvet lined cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had to be very protected and polished and
Yeah.
kept clean.
Yeah.
And these heavy cases in the basement of the music building, and they were in the office of somebody who like taught, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
Now I look back, why were they in her office? Why were they in this room that belonged to someone else?
Yeah.
Maybe she was a visitor, like I don't know what it was, but we had to share
Yeah.
this room with her and we had
Yeah.
to walk in on her lessons at certain times to get the bells
Uh-huh.
in and out. She was always
Yeah.
really peeved, which like who can blame her? But for
Yeah.
some reason we were utterly powerless to change this arrangement.
Oh my gosh.
So what we would do is we would all get together at the start of bells and then
Uh-huh.
like as fast as possible go into her office and she would like
I-
just continue teaching piano, but
Yeah.
she would pause and look at us in this
Yeah.
angry way.
Yeah. 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 What a
Angry
lark.
way.
Oh
While
my goodness.
we, who were not particularly athletic people,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
walked in and out as fast as we could, carrying these very heavy, unwieldy, large cases.
Yeah.
And the tables, because you had to also
Yeah.
set up the tables and the foam padding that you put the bells
Oh
on when
my
you were not
gosh.
playing them. So,
Yeah.
we do this at the beginning and the end. And there was one time, I think we got to play a concert in one of the
Uh-huh.
music halls. So we had to
Uh-huh.
also transport the bells up there and down. And I
Yeah.
remember taking the elevator and we
Uh-huh.
were, I don't know why, we just shoved as much into the elevator in one trip. I guess we could have taken more. But
Yeah.
there was something about we just loaded up the elevator with everything we could. And then
Uh-huh.
we like sat on the foam padding and took like sexy photos because it was just so ridiculous. Because it was this like big padded elevator
Oh my
with these like
goodness.
huge, hulking, unglamorous cases. And we were like
This
a
is
little nicely
great.
dressed, I think, because we had played our concert.
Oh my
And I can
goodness.
like really clearly remember the photo. I don't know if I have it anymore, but it's very clear. It was just like it was so funny. And what were we doing? We were moving these like giant unwieldy bells.
Yeah. And
That was a lark. That was a lark. And that would have been
such a
nothing
lark.
but a dreadful solo chore.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of cracked it. I think it's when you're doing a miserable activity and you have it together
Yeah.
in your midst that you're going to make a lark out of it, and you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
You approach it with good humor. You get the thing
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
I wonder now if there's a way if they're by design can do, and that's the misery, and that's why they're lousy category.
No, this is making me realize like the importance of a lark in a relationship or the ability to have a lark because
Yeah.
much of life is pure drudgery.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if
Self-maintained.
you're with someone who
Yeah.
cannot have a lark with you, the drudgery is just drudgery.
Yeah. Just work.
Just work. Just work.
So I think we're arriving there. There is I think there is to being something into the
Mhm.
Lark if the opportunity.
Yeah,
But I've
that
got
is a
some
high
notes.
etiquette thing to do.
Do as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, you
I think
must. You must.
I've texted you about many other. I think that's why our text is good. I'm trying to think of like the last week was, but they're very funny messages
There's
to
some
each other about.
hilarious.
It would have been
Yes.
the most odious things to tackle alone.
Oh yeah. No, no, and what you're describing sounds fairly odious. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm quite pleased that I don't have to do those things in my weekend.
Is there any like okay, as just to close off, can we think of anything text, because short of the matchmaking suggested, sometimes it is fun to involve someone, even
Yeah, 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 yeah. Is it can it
to
like
lark.
I'm not sure if this is what you mean, but like almost like I don't want to use the word template, but almost like what's the drudgery you're doing today, or like what's it like, or like some way of
Yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah. I haven't worked this during
Uh-huh.
we're now in flipped times. We don't sync
Uh,
up any, but we talk. We're not
um,
particularly cheerful. I think we're both kind of like nose to the grindstone people. It
okay.
makes it better. We don't have a
Yeah.
lark relationship
Yeah.
of it,
Mm.
but it's that's what it is. Find ways to amuse yourself in it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think there's
And
more to life that can be approached in that fashion than maybe.
yeah. Yeah. Amuse is a good one. Uh, because I think part of having a lark is being able to have a sense of wonder too, because you're just like, what is this thing? Or
Yeah.
seeing the
Yeah.
thing for itself.
All right. Well, that's my task for the rest of go
All
off
right.
to my I will
You're
text you
toiling.
later
I'm so sorry
as I
about your
toil away.
toiling.
It's all right.
It
It must be
sounds
done.
remarkably bad.
But see, that's okay. This is if only to talk to someone and have them say, "Sounds remarkably bad."
Like
There's
truly,
something
like in
to that.
fact, when you told me about it, I think my response was something like, "Oh yeah, like proud of you for even doing it." Like I would have just told my parents no.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Send us your etiquette questions at noetiquettepodcast@gmail.com. We will see you next time here on No Etiquette.
Goodbye.